Welcome to Mr. Man, your home for the eerie and unexplained. Horror stories. Tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is right now. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss what lurks in the dark. It started with a silence too heavy for autumn. The trees of the Ozarks had long since shed their golden coats, leaving behind the skeletal silhouettes of branches that clawed at a cold, empty sky. I arrived the last week of November, just before winter would freeze the heart of this little mountain town. I didn't come for a job or a future. I came because I had nowhere else left to go. Philip was gone, Grandpa Phil, my compass, the man who gave me a name, a roof, a path. He raised me when no one else would, when my mother was too lost in strange men and smoke-filled rooms, and my father, a revolving door of mugshots, couldn't find the will to change. Phil made sure I had something close to normal, and then, like the last page of a book you weren't ready to end, he was just gone. His house was mine now. A small two-bedroom cabin tucked on the edge of Hollow Ridge, just past the courthouse and down a winding gravel road the locals called Coyote's Curve. The house smelled of cedar and old whiskey. It still echoed with his music, the blues, the 70s rock, the occasional gospel track when he thought no one was listening. I didn't touch anything the first week. Let the house breathe, let his memory sit unbothered. I drank his scotch, sat in his recliner, read his old journals. Most were mundane, ramblings about weather and deer tracks and his disdain for the local mayor. But some entries, some felt like codes, like whispers between the lines. He wrote about dreams that repeated, a man in a corduroy sweater, rain that never fell. A black umbrella hanging on a hook. I told myself it was the grief talking. That week, the town itself felt like it was holding its breath. Everyone seemed to walk slower. The shops closed early, and every window had the faint glow of yellow light, like candles lit for the dead. I didn't talk to many people. Just nods, glances. The old woman at the general store told me I had my grandpa's eyes. That made me leave without buying anything. Every morning I walked. The air bit through my jacket, but the cold kept my mind from unraveling. I watched frost climb mailbox posts and listened to my boots crackle through frozen leaves. The sky never really changed, always grey, always threatening rain that never came. It was on one of those walks that I first saw him. Main Street was mostly abandoned. Just the post office, the diner, and the old courthouse in the centre like a forgotten god. I stood by the bus stop, watching the last route of the day pull away. I didn't know why I watched it. Maybe because it meant someone somewhere was leaving. And I wasn't. The man stood by the lamp-post. He wasn't there before. I swear that. He wore a corduroy sweater, brown, faded, the kind you'd find folded in a box labelled Dad's Old Stuff. His trousers were pressed, shoes polished. In one hand he held a black umbrella, not open, just hanging like a weight. He didn't look at me at first, just at the sky. Then slowly his head turned. He smiled. "It's going to rain soon," he said. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Something about his voice felt known, like déjà vu stretched too tight. "You'll want this." He held out the umbrella. It was heavier than it looked. The handle was wooden, smooth and worn, carved with swirling symbols that looked almost Celtic, or maybe older. I nodded, took it, tucked it under my arm, didn't say thank you. I should have, but my mouth felt stitched. By the time I looked up again, he was gone. I boarded the bus. It was the last ride out of town, headed toward the trails near Devil's Hollow. I didn't have a plan, just a pull, like something was waiting. The driver didn't ask questions, just glanced at the umbrella and nodded, like he understood something I didn't. As the bus rumbled into the hills, I stared out the window. The trees blurred, their skeletal limbs dancing like shadows on a cave wall. The sky darkened. Not in the way of sunset, but like something was dimming the world. A hush fell over everything. Even the engine sounded muffled. At the trailhead, I got off alone. The wind had teeth. It dragged at my coat and whispered through the branches. I held the umbrella tighter, didn't open it, just carried it like a charm. The forest ahead beckoned and I walked, step by step. each crunch of frost underfoot like a ticking clock. I didn't realize how far I'd gone until I saw the edge. The cliff. It came sudden. One step more and I'd have vanished. The drop was sheer, unforgiving. Below, nothing but black. No forest, no valley. Just void. I should have been afraid. But all I felt was stillness. I turned, no trail behind me, no footprints, no trees, just fog, like the world had folded in on itself. And then I slipped. No scream, no impact, just falling. When I opened my eyes, I was standing by the road, same spot, same bus stop. The sky was clear, the air was warmer. And above me, shielding me from a drizzle I hadn't noticed, was the umbrella. Open. In my hand. A cruiser pulled up. A sheriff's deputy rolled down his window. Thick sunglasses masked his eyes. "What are you doing out here at this hour?" My lips moved before my brain caught up, waiting for the rain. He stared a moment longer, then gestured, "Get in." The ride home was silent. I glanced at the mirror. For a flicker of a second, I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat beside me. A man, smiling, corduroy. Then it was just me. The house lights were on. Everyone. I'd turned them off. I knew I had. On the kitchen table, my backpack lay open. Inside, my notebook, my phone, my will, all stacked neatly. Like someone had unpacked me, organized me. I sat on the floor. The umbrella leaned against the bathtub, dripping. Though it hadn't rained, that night I slept like the dead and dreamt of rivers running backward, of mountains bending toward me, and of a man with no face saying not yet. I woke before dawn, the sky still a bruised navy. The house was silent, but not empty. There was a presence to the quiet now, like it was watching, not resting. The air had weight, like breath held in suspense. I walked into the bathroom. The umbrella stood in the tub, just as I had left it. Still wet, dripping steadily into a small pool that never seemed to grow. I touched it, half expecting it to vanish like a dream. The wood was cool, the fabric slick. A shiver crawled down my spine, even though the heat was on. I needed answers. That morning, I dressed for the trail. Not to hike, but to confront something. I couldn't say what. Maybe a memory. Maybe a ghost. Maybe myself. I laced up my boots, Phil's boots, thick-soled, heavy, worn with time. They were warm, familiar. They made me feel like he was still walking with me. Main Street was asleep when I passed through. The lamppost stood bare, no man, no shadow. I boarded the first bus toward Devil's Hollow again. This time I didn't look out the window. I stared straight ahead, umbrella in hand. At the trailhead, the forest welcomed me like an old friend with secrets. The air was thinner than before. The trees closer together. Their limbs seemed to lean toward the path, as if they had grown in the shape of someone who had passed too often. The wind didn't howl, but whispered. My name? Maybe? Or maybe just guilt and wind wrapped around each other. I walked slowly, retracing my steps. Every bend felt familiar, but wrong, like remembering a dream that you swore was real. My breath came heavy, fogging before me. My feet crunched along the frost-bitten trail. I watched the ground like a detective chasing footprints. Then I saw them. Not just any prints, my boots, the same ones I wore now. Deep in the mud, one after another, leading forward toward the cliff. I bent down, pressed my hand into the print. It matched. Exactly, the heel wear, the odd split in the rubber near the toe. It was impossible. I had fallen here. There had been no trail, no evidence of return. But here it was, a perfect trail leading to death and beyond. The forest thinned. The sky overhead grew white and strained like stretched parchment. Wind carried an edge, sharp and almost metallic. The cliff emerged like a secret being confessed, jagged, eternal. At the edge, the print stopped. No return path, just the void. I stared down. Below, the trees were twisted, their shadows bent in directions that defied the sun. Nothing moved, nothing called. It was silence like the moment before a scream. I looked up, and there he was. The man with the umbrella, standing 10 feet behind me. Same corduroy, same smile lines, but this time, no smile. I spun around. My heart jolted into my throat. I blinked, and he was gone. No footprints, no wind, just the trees. Watching. I stumbled back from the cliff and turned to leave, but the trail had changed. It wasn't gone. Just longer. As though the woods had pulled themselves tighter, drawing out each step. I walked for what felt like hours. The sky refused to shift. Time bent. I passed a tree I knew I had passed before. 3 times. Each time, the bark was different. First smooth, then scratched, then bleeding sap. Finally, the trail widened. I broke into a clearing. My breath caught. At the center stood the umbrella, open, upright, spinning slowly without wind. It cast no shadow. It shouldn't have been there. I had it with me. I reached for it, and everything blinked. Darkness. Then headlights. Then pavement. I stood once again at the edge of town. A car honked. I jumped back. A passing truck sprayed water onto my legs. I looked down. The umbrella was open again, clutched in my hand. I hadn't opened it. I turned back toward the trail, but the road was dry. No sign of the forest. Just the bus stop and the courthouse bell tolling noon. I checked my watch. 5 minutes had passed. I had been gone for hours. I walked home. The world was quieter now. Even quieter than before. When I stepped inside, the television was on. Static. Blazing. I never turned it on. A note lay on the counter in handwriting I recognized. My grandfather's. The umbrella buys time, but it always collects. The bathroom door creaked open. The umbrella stood in the tub again, still dripping. Only this time the water was black, and it was spreading. The rain never came. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the bathroom door. The umbrella hadn't moved, but the black water pooling beneath it had spread like an oil stain. I cleaned it with towels, bleach, even tried moving the umbrella to the back porch. It still dripped, still soaked whatever surface it touched. And then, just before sunrise, it was dry again. Bone dry. No stain, no evidence, only the smell. Wet earth and something older, like mildew and rotting leaves. I called in sick to work. Not that anyone would notice. The animal shelter was quiet this time of year, with barely a stray cat or caged dog left. The volunteers were mostly retirees who saw me as Phil's boy. Their pity clung to me like smoke. I put on Phil's boots again. They felt heavier this time, like they knew where I was going before I did. I tucked the umbrella under my coat and walked back into the cold. This time, I didn't take the bus. I walked. Main Street was already awake, which was strange. Normally it didn't stir before 9, but every window had its lights on. People stood in silence, watching me pass. No smiles, no nods, just eyes, tracking. The trail to Devil's Hollow had grown darker. Not because of the trees, but because the shadows between them had gained weight. Every step felt like I was walking deeper into memory. I reached the cliff in half the time. The wind was still, the trees didn't move, and the footprints were still there. I crouched and examined them again. Same depth, same direction, leading to the edge, but not away. But today, there was something new. A second set of prints, not boots, bare feet, small, child-sized. Fresh. My throat closed. I followed them back from the cliff into the forest. They weaved side to side, sometimes vanishing entirely, only to reappear near twisted roots or broken branches. The forest had changed again. Trees I didn't remember lined the path. Stones carved with symbols I couldn't read jutted from the earth like teeth. One had been cracked down the middle, its surface burned black. I followed the footprints until they vanished at a creek. The water was still, too still. I knelt to touch it, ice cold. I looked into the reflection and saw someone standing behind me. I turned. Nothing. The umbrella was shaking in my grip. When I opened it, black water spilled out. Not dripped, spilled, as if it had been collecting gallons. It soaked into the soil. The trees around me groaned. Birds took flight. Something moved through the underbrush, fast, low, inhuman. And then I heard it. Laughter. Soft, giggling, a child. My blood froze. I followed the sound. The path opened into a clearing I hadn't seen before. In the center stood a wooden cross, old and rotting, carved with a name. Eloise Harper. 1989 to 1997. At its base was a pair of small boots, and beside them a photograph. It was me, or at least it looked like me. Younger, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing beside a girl in a yellow dress. She was smiling. I wasn't. I didn't remember the photo being taken. The laughter came again, this time from behind the tree line. I chased it, pushing through branches, thorns clawing at my jacket. Then I saw her, the girl in the yellow dress. She stood by the creek, staring into the water, Her hands were cupped as if she were holding something. She turned slowly. Her face was blank, not in expression. Blank. No features, just smooth skin where eyes and mouth should have been. She opened her hands. Inside was a folded note. She placed it on a rock and disappeared into the fog. I approached, trembling. The note was damp, but the ink was clear. The umbrella doesn't keep the rain away. It keeps something else in. I stumbled back, dropped the note, and ran. The forest bent, paths folded. I saw symbols in the bark that blinked like eyes. I heard whispers in the leaves. When I burst back into the clearing, the cross was gone. Only the photograph remained, now crumpled and burned at the edges. I ran all the way home. Inside, the bathroom door was closed. From beneath it, water leaked. The umbrella had returned to the tub. The puddle beneath it was red. The red puddle in the bathtub shimmered under the overhead light. I stood frozen at the threshold, my mind clawing for logic. The umbrella leaned silently, handle against tile, like it had never moved. But the water beneath it was thick, dark, unmistakable. Not paint, not wine. Blood. I backed away and slammed the door shut. My breath hitched in my throat. I held it like a scream. I waited, hours, I wasn't sure. Eventually I crept back. I opened the door, slow, braced for something, anything. The tub was dry, bone dry. Even the tiles were clean, no stain, no smell. The umbrella sat there innocently as though nothing had ever happened. But it was never dry. Not truly. Every time I touched it, my fingers came back damp. The air in the house had changed. Heavy, moist, like a swamp in spring. No matter how much I ran the heater, no matter how many windows I opened, there was always a trace of fog on the glass. I started hearing sounds. At first, the dripping, subtle, in the dead of night, even when the faucet was shut tight. Then came the whispers, from the bathroom, from behind closed doors, from the umbrella itself. I recorded it once, left my phone beside it overnight. In the morning, the audio file was corrupted. All I could hear was static, and beneath that, my name. Spoken again and again in my grandfather's voice. The smell followed me, that earthy, rotting scent, like wet leaves mouldering in an open grave. At work, the other volunteers noticed. One old woman, June, said I smelled like the bottom of the well. When I asked her what that meant, she wouldn't answer, just crossed herself and walked away. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamt of water, drowning, gasping, a ceiling of roots and black waves, and always a figure above me, holding the umbrella, shielding me from a rain that never reached my skin. But it wasn't shielding me anymore. It was watching. One night I moved it to the shed behind the house. I locked the door. I even wrapped the umbrella in a tarp and sealed it with rope. I didn't sleep, but I felt lighter. Until morning. The door to the shed stood wide open. The tarp was folded neatly on the porch, and the umbrella was back in the tub, still dripping. That day I dug through the attic, searched every box Phil had left. I needed answers, needed a reason. That's when I found the journal. Tucked inside a box marked 1973, bound in cracked leather, pages yellowed with age. Inside, the same looping handwriting. Phil had written about the umbrella, not directly. He never named it. But he spoke of the thing that follows and the gift that isn't. He wrote about the man in the corduroy sweater. Said he'd seen him at the courthouse steps during a thunderstorm in '59. Said he offered him something he couldn't refuse. He accepted, and ever since he'd been watched. The rain never falls, he wrote, but I'm always wet, soaked through in spirit, like something drowned inside me and now waits for me to notice. He described dreams of drowning. A girl in yellow, a creek that ran backward. He'd been there too. It was a cycle, a curse, passed like a family heirloom from one bearer to the next. The last entry chilled me to the bone. When the umbrella starts dripping blood, it means the past is hungry. It's time to return what was borrowed. I shut the journal, threw it across the room. The wind howled through the window pane. A gust slammed the back door open. In the yard stood the man. Corduroy sweater, smile lines. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. When I blinked, he was gone. And in the kitchen sink, water pooled. Black, thick, rising slowly over the drain. The umbrella had moved again. This time it leaned against my bedroom door. Still wet, still waiting. The first letter arrived the next day. It wasn't mailed. No postmark, no stamp. Just sitting there on the welcome mat like it had been hand-delivered by a ghost. The envelope was weathered, cream-coloured, the edges curling like it had spent decades buried in some desk drawer. My name was written on the front. Only my name. Inside, a single sheet of paper, folded 3 times. You are not the first, but you might be the last. There was no signature. My heart pounded in my chest. I checked the locks, bolted every door and window. The umbrella sat untouched in the tub, but the air around it felt thicker, like humidity before a summer storm, pressing against the walls of the house, seeping into my lungs. I thought of burning the letter, but something told me more would come. I was right. The second letter was in the mailbox the next morning. Same paper, same handwriting, same ink like it had been written decades ago with a fountain pen. Phil wasn't the first either, but he lasted longer than most until he gave it to you. That line broke me. My hands trembled. My throat felt lined with ice. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a transaction. A transfer. Phil had known. He had prepared. The journal, the silence, the unspoken warnings. He hadn't left me the umbrella. He'd passed it on. That night I heard footsteps in the attic. Slow. Dragging. Like wet boots. I crept upstairs with a flashlight, every step creaking under me. The hatch was closed, but I swore I could see shadows moving underneath. When I opened it, nothing. Just the scent again. Damp earth and a new letter, placed neatly on the attic floorboards. The umbrella keeps you alive, but at a cost. It trades your moments for memory. It erases. Erases? I ran to my bookshelf, pulled down old photo albums, family pictures, graduation, vacations. They were still there, mostly, but in a few, something was wrong. Faces blurred. Mine, mostly. In one, I stood beside Phil on the dock of Lake Hollow, both of us holding fishing poles, but my face was a smear like someone had run a thumb over wet ink. In another, a birthday party, I had no eyes. And in one, the worst, I wasn't there at all. Just Phil, alone, holding an umbrella. The next letter came tucked into the umbrella's handle. You're being rewritten. A little more each day. I shouted into the empty house. Demanded answers. Demanded to know who was doing this. The silence answered, followed by a knock at the door. It wasn't a person, just a parcel, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Inside, a box of old letters, yellowed and cracked. Dozens, maybe more. All from other names, all warnings, all stories. I accepted the umbrella in 1934. I gave it away in 52. He never forgave me. It saved me in the war, but I haven't slept since. My daughter vanished. They said she ran away, but she's still here, in the rain. One after another, a timeline of torment. I noticed one name repeated. Eloise Harper, the girl in the clearing, the grave, the faceless child. In one letter, the writer said she was the first to take the umbrella without being offered. Now she walks the spaces between. She wants it back, but not for herself, for what's under the rain. I dropped the letter, my knees buckled. The walls around me creaked, the ceiling moaned. I felt the air shift. The umbrella was no longer in the bathroom. It was in the hallway. Open, dripping, onto the carpet, onto the photographs that had fallen from the wall. My baby picture was soaked through, my features erased. I slammed the door to my room and barricaded it with furniture, and then I found one last envelope, taped to the inside of my bedroom window. There is no returning it, only passing it on. If you wait too long, it will choose for you. Outside, the clouds began to gather, and for the first time in weeks, it started to rain. The first drop hit the kitchen window like a warning. It shouldn't have rattled the glass, but it did, like hail, like bone, a hollow, unnatural tap that echoed across the house. I froze mid-step. A shiver passed through me, and I wasn't sure if it was the cold or something older. Then came another drop, then another, then the downpour. It rained with purpose, not cleansing, not life-giving. It hammered the roof like fists, pounded against the windows until I swore the glass would shatter. The sound was relentless, a drumming of 1,000 fists demanding to be let in. I had never heard rain like that. I had never seen it either. because it wasn't water. I stepped to the window and looked through the glass. The drops running down weren't clear. They were dark, slightly red, slightly brown, mud and blood and memory running down the panes like tears. In the street, people stood still. Every house, every porch, people holding umbrellas, not shielding themselves, just standing, like they were waiting, like they had done this before. I stepped back from the window. My house groaned. The lights flickered. The smell of wet earth grew stronger, rising from the floorboards like rot, and in the hallway the umbrella moved. It twitched, once, then slowly unfolded on its own, rising from the floor like a corpse from water. It hovered in the air, bobbing gently, tilting toward me. I ran, out the back, through the rain, into the yard. It was ice cold and thick, like being drenched in river sludge. My clothes soaked instantly, clinging to my skin. I gasped for air and gagged. The world was grey. Not just colourless, but drained, like someone had turned the saturation down to 0. Trees were outlines, the sky was a smudge. And the people? They were no longer people. Their faces blurred, eyes empty, mouths open in silent scream. Each held an umbrella, each one open, each one dripping black. They turned toward me in unison. I stumbled backwards, slipped in the mud. My hands sank into the earth and the voices came. 1,000 whispers all at once. From every direction. From the sky, from the trees, from inside me. You've held it long enough. It's time. You owe. The umbrella hovered above me again, its ribs shuddered. Water poured from its edges, soaking me with every memory I had tried to bury. Phil's death. My parents. The girl in yellow. I screamed. It didn't matter. The earth opened. A crack in the ground beneath me. Not wide, but deep. Bottomless. Like the land was sighing, and from that crack rose a hand. Small. Childlike. She pulled herself up. Eloise. Her face was still blank. Still wrong. But now I could feel her thoughts, not hear them, feel them, like someone whispering inside my bones. I want it back, she said. I shook my head. I didn't take it. You used it. I didn't ask for it. But you held it. The sky screamed. Thunder cracked like splitting bone. The trees bent toward us. Everything was pointing at me. And then the umbrella folded. Not collapsed. Folded, like a dying flower. The rain stopped instantly. The silence was a blade. Eloise stood before me, water dripping from her hair, her arms at her sides. Then she raised one finger, pointed behind me. I turned. Phil stood at the edge of the yard, not quite Phil. A version of him, younger, sadder, hollow-eyed. He held his own umbrella. It wasn't wet. I didn't know, he said. You left it to me. I didn't have a choice. Then give me one now. He nodded slowly, then stepped back into the shadows. Eloise reached out. She didn't take the umbrella. She touched my chest, and suddenly I remembered everything. Every storm, every borrowed moment, every person who had carried it before me, their faces, their voices, their screams. It was all inside me now. The umbrella hadn't been protecting me. It had been feeding, and now it was full. The crack in the earth sealed itself. Eloise vanished, the sky cleared, the sun rose, and the umbrella was dry, for the first time. For 3 days after the rain, the sky was wrong, not in the usual ways, not in colour or shape or movement. It still stretched wide, still shifted from pale morning to amber dusk, but it didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore, like it had been lent, on loan from something that now expected it back. The umbrella was dry, yes, but something else had taken its place. That first morning I woke with the taste of salt on my lips, not sweat. Sea salt, briny and ancient. When I went to the bathroom, I noticed something stranger. My reflection blinked slower than I did, only by a beat, a breath. But it was enough to make my knees buckle. The mirror didn't show fear. It studied me, assessed me, like something behind the glass was trying to remember how to wear my skin. I turned away and slammed the door. The umbrella was gone, so was the bathtub. In its place, a hole. Perfectly round, bone white around the edges, about the size of a manhole, but deeper than my eyes could follow. At its edge, moisture, not dripping, not leaking, breathing. The house had changed, walls slightly off angle, lights flickering to a rhythm not powered by electricity. Sometimes, when I walked down the hallway, I'd hear my footsteps echo a second too late, like the house was rehearsing them. And outside, the sky watched. Neighbours didn't make eye contact anymore. They didn't wave. They moved like dream figures, gliding, unspeaking, always just a little too slow. But the letters didn't stop, each one more cryptic than the last. The sky you see is not the sky that sees you. Keep moving, it feeds on stagnancy. Do not look up during the third hour. And then, the most chilling, it has noticed you. I stopped sleeping altogether. I paced, I recorded myself, I set alarms. I took Polaroids of every room, trying to catch the thing I couldn't name. In one photo, I wasn't there at all. Just the room, lit, waiting. And in the sky beyond the window, a figure, upside down, stretching from cloud to cloud like a crack across the heavens. I ran outside, but the sky was blue. Perfect, except it was humming. Low, subsonic, like a voice beneath the waves. At the post office, the clerk stared at me too long. Her smile stayed wide as she passed me another envelope. Inside, the umbrella was never the curse. It was the seal. Now that it's dry, the gate is open. I collapsed on the sidewalk, my mouth filled with salt again. That night I dreamt of oceans above the sky, tides crashing over the moon, and a voice, soft and endless. You borrowed a sky that wasn't yours. Now you owe it stars. I woke to find the stars gone, not clouded, gone. Just a blank ceiling above the world. And in the center of it, a circle, open, pulsing. The sky was looking back. I woke to the sound of breathing. Not mine. It was slow, labored, deliberate, coming from beneath the floorboards. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. Just lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling where that strange circular opening had hung last night. Now it was gone, or hidden, or watching from somewhere else. The breathing continued, and it was close. I swung my feet over the edge of the bed and froze. The hardwood floor was warm, too warm, like the house had a fever, a pulse. I leaned down, ear pressed to the planks. A voice whispered, "You are walking on our mouths." I shot upright, heart hammering in my chest. My ears rang, my vision pulsed. The air was thick, heavy with dust, damp with memory. The hallway was darker than usual. The pictures along the wall had changed. Not dramatically, subtly. In one I was turned slightly more to the left. In another a shadow stood behind me that I didn't remember. In every frame my eyes were slowly drifting away from the lens, toward the floor. That day I didn't leave the house. I didn't eat, I didn't drink. I listened. The whispers returned at noon. Then again at dusk, each time clearer, closer. Don't dig, don't disturb, we are barely held. What you walk on is not wood, it's skin. We remember the ones before. I ran my fingers along the floorboards, tracing the grain. It felt wrong, soft in places, pulsing. Once I thought I felt it twitch. I found myself counting my steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over. It became a rhythm, a chant. I didn't know why I was doing it, only that it felt safer. Until I stepped on the 8th board in the kitchen. It sank, not much, a quarter inch, but it screamed. Not in volume, in silence. A dead silence that swallowed the sound of the world. My ears popped, my teeth ached, and the whisper came again. She's under here, waiting. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the board. It lifted easily like it wanted to be removed. Beneath was not a crawl space, not pipes or insulation. It was a tunnel, dirt-lined, damp, breathing. I should have called someone, but I didn't. I climbed in. The air changed immediately, thicker, older. Time itself felt wrong, slowed, elastic. My flashlight flickered, then dimmed to a faint glow. The tunnel twisted. I crawled. Minutes passed. Then hours. The walls began to change, from soil to root, from root to something else. Flesh, wet, pulsing, veined. Every movement echoed with a squelch. I wanted to turn back. I needed to turn back. But a voice ahead whispered, "You already passed her mouth. Now you must reach her ear." I continued. The tunnel opened into a chamber, large, circular, like the inside of a skull. Every surface was alive. Walls twitched. The ceiling sighed. In the center stood a chair. A child's chair, and on it the umbrella. Dry. I stepped forward. The moment I touched it, the walls screamed. Voices, countless voices, layered like sediment. Phil's, Eloise's, others I didn't know. Return what was never yours. You buried her with it. Now she's risen with teeth. You borrowed the sky. Now you owe the soil. The chair collapsed, the umbrella unravelled, not opened, unravelled, into thread, into root, into something that burrowed instantly into the chamber walls. The entire space shook. I turned to run, but the tunnel had changed. It was no longer a path. It was a throat, and it was swallowing. I scrambled, crawled, dug with my nails. My hands bled. The walls pulsed. The whisper followed me. You shouldn't have looked. You shouldn't have listened. The floorboards burst open above me. I shot up through them into my kitchen, covered in mud and blood. The house was silent, but not empty. The walls trembled gently, like they were breathing through my lungs. I sat there on the kitchen floor, shaking, and reached for the envelope resting by the sink. No name. Inside, you've heard her now. She will follow your silence. The umbrella was gone, but the whispers had only just begun. In the days that followed the tunnel, I started to lose time. Moments would vanish. I'd blink and find myself standing in a different room, or walking down the middle of the street with no memory of leaving my house. One time I came to with dirt under my nails, kneeling beside a storm drain, whispering someone's name I didn't know. Anna. Always Anna. I checked the umbrella's resting place every day. Still gone. But the whispers, they were louder. At first only at night. Then during dawn. Then full daylight. They echoed in pots, mirrors, radios, even my phone when it was off. They called me by name, and sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they called me Philip. It wasn't just the house anymore. It was the world. Sidewalks echoed too many footsteps. Doorbells rang without visitors. Strangers stared too long, then blinked and walked on like nothing had happened. Everything seemed caught in a delay, like the world was buffering. Even my voice wasn't always mine. I recorded myself, reading aloud a grocery list. Simple. Safe. When I played it back, I didn't recognize the tone. It was deeper, older, and at the end it whispered, "The roots are beneath all of us." I stopped leaving the house until she showed up. Not Eloise, a woman. Late 40s, windburned skin, eyes like granite. She didn't knock, just opened the screen door and stood there like she belonged. "I heard the umbrella's dry," she said. I froze. "You?" I asked. "Years ago," she said. "Took me a decade to shake it. Her name was Marla. She came inside like she'd been here before." "Mind if I talk?" she asked. "You'll want to listen." She told me her story, the whispers, the breathing house, the sky that stared. She described the tunnel in perfect detail, right down to the child's chair. She'd been through it all, survived it. "Barely," she said. "You don't outlive it. You just outlast the hunger." "What is it?" I asked. Marla stared into the empty fireplace. "A hole," she said. "In time, in memory, in place. It's not evil, just empty, and emptiness consumes." She handed me a notebook. Inside, dozens of names, hundreds, dates, symbols, notes in half-legible handwriting. "This is everyone I found," she said. "Who held the umbrella, who passed it, who vanished." I found Phil's name and mine. The last line read, "He breaks the cycle or becomes the echo." "What does that mean?" I asked, but Marla was already gone. The next morning I found a new envelope. Inside she told you, "Now listen, the silence is too loud." That day I started hearing other things. Music, old jazz songs playing in the drains. Laughter behind the walls. Children running through the attic. I climbed up, but it was empty. Just an old phonograph spinning without a record. The umbrella's shadow stretched across the wall, but there was no umbrella, just the echo. That's when I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Every word I spoke, something else repeated, half a second late, same voice, different intention, like a badly synced dub of my own thoughts. I wrote notes to myself on mirrors, on windows, on the fridge. "You are the echo." But I didn't remember writing them. One morning I found a hole in the backyard, not large, circular, clean, something buried inside. I dug. 6 inches down, a box. Inside a tape recorder, a photo and another letter. The photo showed me at 10 years old, holding the umbrella. Phil beside me. I had no memory of it. The tape, my voice again, reciting something over and over. "To leave, one must be forgotten. To leave, one must be forgotten. To leave," I screamed, I sobbed. I broke mirrors. The house cracked, the doorways leaned, the floor sighed. And then silence. I waited days. Then one final envelope. No handwriting. Inside, one line. "All echoes fade. unless someone listens. The final day began like all others, with silence. But this silence was different. It wasn't hollow. It was full of breath, waiting, listening. The echoes had quieted overnight, which frightened me more than their presence. At least when they whispered, I knew they hadn't decided yet. Now, the air was still, expectant. I walked through the house slowly. The walls no longer trembled. The floor no longer pulsed. Everything was calm, too calm. It was the moment between lightning and thunder. The door to the basement stood open. I hadn't opened it. A staircase, unfamiliar and endless, descended into the dark, and carved into the wooden frame above it. To leave, one must be remembered by no one. I didn't hesitate. I walked down. The steps were longer than they should have been. The light dimmed with each descent, but I could see, not because of a bulb or torch, but because the space itself glowed, like the walls radiated memory. I passed photographs carved into stone, etched in motion, my childhood, Phil's face, my first love. Moments I hadn't remembered until I saw them again. The deeper I went, the more personal the memories became. Shameful ones, ugly ones. Regret. I stopped at one in particular. It was Phil, standing in a field, handing me the umbrella. I couldn't have been more than 10. His expression wasn't loving, it was desperate, like he knew. The stairwell ended at a vast black door, no knob, no keyhole, only a handle that curved away from me. Backward. It opened not toward me, but away, into the past, into whatever had been forgotten. A plaque above it read, "To open this door is to step into never." I touched the handle, and it turned. The door creaked open with the sound of 1,000 voices inhaling, and then I was no longer in my body. I was drifting through memories not mine, visions, lives. The umbrella, handed down from generation to generation, each carrier breaking a little more of themselves to pass it on, each one whispering, "Let it end with me," and each one failing, until now. I found myself in the center of a vast circular room, the same one from the tunnel, but aged, covered in names, symbols, prayers etched in salt and ash, and there, floating in the center, was the umbrella, closed, dry, still. I reached out. Voices screamed in protest, "You cannot bind us! You are a door now!" But I did not listen, because I heard one voice louder than the rest. Phil's. He was crying. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I just wanted to keep you safe." And then Eloise. "No one's safe when nothing ends." I grasped the umbrella. It was warm. And in that moment I understood. The umbrella was not cursed. It was a seed, planted in suffering, watered by memory, blooming in grief. It needed soil, it needed a body, and I had been carrying it for too long. I raised it over my head and opened it one final time. The room filled with wind. Light poured from every crack, names lifted from the walls, swirling like ash in a storm. The whispers screamed, then faded, then silence. The sky above opened, the true sky, full of unfamiliar stars, and the umbrella dissolved in my hands. I collapsed. When I awoke, I was in my bed. The house was whole. The air light. My phone rang. It was the local shelter, asking if I could still volunteer next week. I said yes. No echoes replied. The bathtub was dry. The mirror reflected only me. Outside, the sky was blue. And when I walked Main Street that afternoon, I passed strangers who nodded, smiled, recognized me, not as an echo, not as a door, but as someone who had made it back. At the far end of town, beneath the oak tree where Phil used to sit, something was sticking out of the soil. I knelt down, a piece of wood, weather-worn, familiar. I brushed the dirt away. It was a piece of the umbrella's handle, and carved into it. "It ends with me." I smiled. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, and above me, in a sky that finally belonged to us again, the clouds began to part. The end.